I am Norman Younger, and welcome to the webinar. The title of the webinar today is Selling Your Practice, a case study analysed step by step. But before we start, I'd just like to ask you all a quick question. It's a yes or no answer. If you could just spend a second looking at that and furnish with your reply. Here we go. Okay, by the way, it says winter 2016 bottom right-hand corner. I was intending giving that a wee bit earlier in the year, but I think until the 21st of March it is officially still winter. We've actually got the sunshine out here in Manchester, but it's a wee bit of a nip in the air in the evenings. Okay. So this webinar is to help you understand the kind of things which could crop up when you come to sell your practice, either sort of immediately or during the due diligence process, which might be discovered, so to speak, by a prospective purchaser. If you look at the case on its own merits and its own right, you might think there's a lot of things happening here. Surely this doesn't happen, all these things happen all at once. You'd be correct, I have pushed the boundaries just a wee bit, that people can get a feel for the sort of things across the board which could potentially go wrong, or raise a red flag to a purchaser. If you have any questions, please type them in and I'll endeavour to either answer them at the time or afterwards. Okay, so thank you very much for responding to the poll. Interestingly enough, only 17% of you have said that you're like to sell because you're fed up, which is quite encouraging. Means you're enjoying what you're doing, and obviously you're going to have some other reason for that. Okay, so let's get started now. First slide. Let's look at the key facts, what we've got here. And these key facts have been taken from my own experience over the last 8 or 9 years of dealing with practices. So the first key fact is it's the practitioner, it's a female practitioner on her own, operating through a limited company, a member of the august body, the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales. I do appreciate that many of you will be members of different regulatory bodies, but it's just an example I've picked out. I myself am not a member of the Institute, I'm a member of the ACCA, so there's definitely no bias there. At age 58, so she would have come to me to say, you know, she's looking to step down, and obviously there's going to be a handover process which is going to take some time, and one can reasonably assume that she's looking at 60 as when she wants to have sold the practice. There is an associate, a gentleman there who's 38 years old. He's spent 20 years of this practice as an articled clerk. You can see he's got a lot of responsibility. He's professionally qualified at Institute of Tax as well. So he's a big hitter, and he's clearly part of the furniture there, which this is the first potential buyer would say, all right, this guy's most likely going to want to stay. There's on top of that 2 other qualified accountants, 1 articled clerk, a secretary, and a bookkeeper doing the books of the practice itself, not doing the books for the clients. And this practice has been going for 29 years, so a well-established practice. It's has a prominent position and reputation. It's on the high street in this sort of market town in the south of England. It doesn't take too much imagination to picture the kind of setting we have, perhaps Wilmington-on-Sea of Dad's Army fame, somewhere like that, where they are part of the community and everybody knows them. So really there's not much advertising spend, generally, the odd bits here and there, and practitioner, our lady practitioner is active in the local clubs and societies. So typically it's the sort of practice where someone was saying, you know, I'm starting a business, I'm looking for an accountant, they go straight down the high street and this is the person who they'll choose, and most likely as well for a good 10, 15, 20 miles the hinterland, this practice would be the natural choice, and certainly it's the place that would be recommended if they were to say to somebody, who would you use as your accountant? So let me just pop another question at you, please, everybody, which is, do you think your practice is ready to sell? Now, it'd be interesting to see what you think about the state of your practices. A quick look at that, see what the answers are. Okay, there's only 11% of you are actually confident that your practice is ready to sell, which I suppose is in line. People want to find out. More than half of you think it's not, and 30% don't know. But we'll see if you change your ideas in the course of this discussion. Okay, so let's have a look at the clients, at the client profile. Okay, so we've got a wide mix of clients here, from the home working seamstress to small cottage industry. There's a cottage on the right hand side, very cute, the sea behind it, rather idyllic setting, if you can only dream of some of us. All the way through to the landed farmer with his perhaps 100 acres, working farm, profitable, lots of small tradesmen. You'll see the plumber there, seems very happy at work there, wielding his wrench, no doubt thinking of his hourly charge out rate, which is probably well in excess of what many of you are charging out at. The gross recurring fees are £675,000. Just to clarify, what for some of you is the obvious, but some of you might not appreciate the term gross recurring fees, where the value lies, is that they are recurring. In other words, it's businesses or individuals coming back year after year for the next set of accounts, possibly the next tax return, as opposed to a practice which is specialised and deals with one-off assignments. There will be a slightly different way of valuing such a practice, but of course it still has its value. And we're netting £285,000 after the expenses. It's a good profit, that. In case anyone didn't tell you, accountancy practices which are well run and well organised throw off cash, and it's once you get to this kind of sort of £400,000, £500,000 plus is where you begin really to see serious net profits. There's 360 clients. It's a good client book. If you want to keep in contact with your clients, it's going to take a lot of time, and an accountant typically should look after their clients and be in regular contact. Again, this example in this practice is where the gentleman's been there for the 20 years or so. He would certainly be a linchpin in a handover practice. It's a strong point for a purchaser, and obviously if you were selling this practice, you would have to make sure, of course, that the gentleman was on board and willing to move. You need to find out, you know, what his intentions. Typically, you will find that somebody with that level of qualification has been in the same position for that many years. Would not be going very far, very fast, and will stay. But you know, it may need to be borne in mind that his palm may require greasing as a handover. He's helped you build the practice, and it's, you know, you've got to keep him sweet. Fees, interesting, a mix of fees here, which is a situation which not all of you will necessarily recognise. There is a huge gap here from, you know, £475 up to the highest of 17,500, which is the sort of fee where you'll be doing the pay-as-you-earn, doing the bookkeeping, perhaps going in half a day a week, a member of staff, just to look at things there. Obviously, someone with that kind of fee is a highly profitable business, and you would need to make sure they are going to stay on board, and you can manage the handover, because if you've got 2 or 3 fees like that, and you don't want to find them having concerns that the buyer is unable to handle them, or they've not necessarily got the confidence you might like them to have in the buyer. So this sort of thing would potentially be flagged, certainly if there were a few of them. In fact, I'm working on a case now where it's actually a distressed sale, a much smaller practice, where the purchaser has insisted that the seller arranges an evening, if you like, of meet the buyer. So for certain clients, to make sure everyone stays on board. And 95% of the clients are middle class. Some people say somewhat of an anachronistic description in this day and age, but there are many parts of the country where the middle class is representative of what the town is and what the client base is, and not every purchaser of a practice is necessarily going to fit in with this type of client profile. So we've got the background, we've looked at the practice, we've looked at the clients, we've got a nice practice here. Let's see what the problems are going to be as we move on. Before we do that, go into problems, let's have another question to fire at you. A quick question now: what would be your optimal timescale to sell? You've come today to this webinar, but how far off are you to when you really want to be out? There's a choice of answers there. Let's have a look and see what you've got to say. Okay, the vast overwhelming majority have not decided yet, which is exactly what I would have expected to find. 10% of you want out within 3 months. I won't say it's surprising, but it's quite a fair few number of people, because there's a lot of attendees here. But it's interesting to see. Those who have not decided yet are looking to do it a wee bit longer. 10% of you within 24 months. Hopefully what we're about to learn will give you the time to get your house in order. Okay. The requirements of the deal. What are the overwhelming requirements? This is what the seller wants, and the seller is in the driving seat. Retirement by 60 is a self-imposed deadline, and therefore 18 months afterwards available, perhaps in a consultancy, perhaps to work as an employee full-time. It's not, in this particular case, we don't yet know what Madam's intentions are, but you'd be surprised how many sellers actually want to continue working full or part-time in a practice, even for up to 5 years we've had. And 50% is required up front, and 12 months the clawback period. Clawback periods and payment settlements typically go from 12 to 24 months, so 12 is not unreasonable. So it means you'd have her full attention certainly for 12 months, and you'd have that time, in which case usually to establish your rapport within your clients and see whether they stayed past the new billing cycle. So quite straightforward requirements here, nothing too complex. Now let's have a look at this practice and let's see where the fun begins. All of the practice books are up to date. Now, you'd be surprised how many cobblers' children are going barefoot, to quote the old expression, where the accountant's books themselves are an absolute mess. And of course, someone who's coming in to look at the books will be frightened of other books in the mess, because the accountant is just sloppy. It doesn't really, only does what they have to do when they have to do it, or is this practice poorly run? Is a sign of something amiss. Here's an interesting one. Let's see where the bouncers come in. First bouncer is we have a pending PI claim about a tax matter. Been running for 12 months. Now, responsibility for settling this is not going to be yours, however. The question is, why did this happen? Has this been a case of incompetence on the behalf of the tax expert who's employed? Is this tax expert past the best? Have they made a mistake? Are they liable even? perhaps there's no liability and the client is just looking for a whipping boy to vent their frustration. Remember, a professional with insurance is an easy target. I'm sure many of you have been on the wrong end, certainly the threat of a PI claim, and it's easy to throw claims out there to threaten. Where it comes to it, of course, is a completely separate matter. So we don't know too much about this. It's sort of been mentioned by the seller, and of course the seller would have to mention this because there is nothing worse than discovery, finding something which you were not expecting to find. And we have here an employment discrimination case, the bane of every employer, and not just the discrimination case, it's made the headline in the local news. People are talking about it, there's tittle-tattle, there is gossip, and the question is, has this damaged the reputation? What's the truth? What's the story? I'd be surprised if you found both these things going on in one practice, but as I said earlier, trying to bring out here, you know, things which could potentially be an issue. We've got £100,000 of fees are outstanding from a total of 38 clients. Nothing particularly untoward there. There's nothing to worry me too much. It's about 1/6, 1/7 of the fees. And the building is rented on a 10-year lease, has an either way break clause on 18 months. Now this is where it becomes interesting. It's an either way break clause, so could be advantageous to a buyer who wants to stay on, that they got the chance to get this fleshed out now with you know, to get it renewed. Or a buyer could say, well, we are a local firm, we're not quite as prominent as your firm is, and we really don't need to have your building. We could take your clientele into our building. We've got some spare desks, we've got space, wherever it might be, and we can knock out £40,000 a year in rent and rates, assuming, of course, that after yesterday's budget announcement, you're still paying rates. I'd expect a practice of this size in terms of the amount of space needed and prominent position in the south of England would probably be paying some rates. So there are savings here, obviously establishment costs as well, but the lease is very, very important because the question is as well, what would the renewal be? I'm dealing with a case now in London where the lease has come to an end and the landlord's been messing around a bit, and they've come back and wants to double the rent. So this is a problem for the buyer because the buyer would want to keep the location, and the question is the rent worth it? What's the market rate? And it's getting quite lively now and it's spoiling the party. We've steady growth in the past 5 years, approximately 4% per annum until last year. Last year, as you know, was the employment case and this pending PI claim. So it's the beginning of a trend because no new clients have joined in 9 months. Believed to have gone to a rival firm. Well, is that rival firm the person who's doing the buying? Because if the buyer is the rival firm, they're going to know it, and it's going to impact upon negotiations. Whether or not to declare this to the seller that yes, we are the rival firms, we are mopping up your clients, and therefore we think your practice is not worth what you think it is. This is something which would have to come out in the negotiations. But the point we're saying here is that when you stand back and look at all these things going on, what you think is going to be straightforward for selling is all of a sudden it's become a little bit less clear. It's not unlike selling your house. You've lived happily in your house for many years. You know where the cracks are. You know there's perhaps a problem with a couple of feet of your garden in terms of title and missing deeds, which is 30, 40 years old. But when it comes to buying, the buyer is not going to take the same relaxed attitude as you might. Now let me throw another question at you. Having seen that and perhaps starting to think, I've got something going on here. Do you have any idea of the approximate value of your own practice? Let's have a look at this question. Straight yes or no. Interesting, results still coming in. A little under half of you have answered yes, you've got approximate idea. A little over half of you have answered that you have no idea, not even an approximate idea, which I find very, very interesting. Very informative indeed. Okay, so let's look at the next page. Okay, let's look at the issues now. So there's a clear line of issues here. This little chappie on the right-hand side is not happy at all. Okay, negative publicity over the claim, because if we dig a wee bit deeper, we find the other side who's making this claim for unfair dismissal is a well-connected local family. So are they out to ruin your practice? And once you've gone, once the seller is gone, will that be the end of the story? It's more exciting than the Archers, this, isn't it? The PI claim, how does this affect your business? And together with the employment claim, what it's done is it's taken an eye off the ball. We all know that major events, whether it's related to the practice directly or something in your personal life going on, for example, a move premises at a house or illness, they can throw things off keel, and you can unwittingly be neglecting the welfare of your practice, the staff, and the clients. And when a couple of things come together, you can get a wobble. The question is, can you explain this to the buyer? Will the buyer believe you? Again, could impact upon the value of your practice. The lease, the landlord's not made the intentions clear, and there's nothing to rent within 3 miles that should be remotely suitable. And remember, we are on the high street, and it's a plum location. So something else thrown into the mix, and the landlord has really got no reason to make his intentions clear. He's got 18 months to go to the break, and he's really not interested in your welfare from that aspect. We don't even know what the relationship with the landlord is like. They might not even be in talking terms. And debtors has been going up. It's more than it has been in the last 5 years. It's not worryingly high per se. As we all know from the profession, clients often only settle their bill when they want something from you, but has gone up substantially over the past 5 years average. Again, are these legal cases a distraction, or clients in financial difficulty perhaps? Preferred payments plus a short clawback with other problems may spook a lender. What if your buyer is borrowing the money? Yeah, don't think about that. Not every accountant is awash with funds or has lots of money crammed under their mattress. They do often borrow money, and lenders, you don't need me to tell you, in the last few years have become quite strict, and as soon as they see something which they're not entirely happy with or doesn't quite fit the ideal scenario, they might back out. And of course, we mentioned right back at the beginning, how do you associate react to an outsider coming in? He really would like to buy the practice. They can't raise the funds, which leaves us a very interesting scenario here. Would he want to buy it in partnership with an outsider, or can he be persuaded by an outsider to have some sort of profit share? This is where it gets interesting, because this associate is in a very powerful position to spoil your party. And as I'm always fond of saying, as all my friends will tell you, every man has his price. When it comes to money and people's futures, you never know how people are going to react. So we've got quite a few issues here, and to be honest, I can't see them all happening in any individual practice, but I'd certainly say half of them at least could be relevant in a practice. I would say typically the last one could be an issue, is likely to be an issue, commonly found. You could have one of these claims in itself not necessarily the problem, but creating distraction. And the third thing I would say would be quite common would be an issue with the lease. Okay, so now we've mentioned about staffing on the outside, I'm going to throw a last question at you for today, which is, see, how many staff are you employing? Quick question for you. Last couple of votes are coming in now. Okay, over half of you are employing 3 or more members of staff for accounts preparation or using subcontractors. You may be familiar with the potential of the last item, that could even be the case, even if you only employed 1. Only 15% of you are employing nobody for accounts preparation, so you're obviously very, very hard workers and hopefully very, very efficient workers, which means when you come to sell, you will not have the problem of the last item. Lucky people. Okay, let's see what's on the next page. So what are the solutions? What can we do about this? Because everything can be solved. It's a matter of approaching it. Obviously, the PI claim would be indemnified in the one which is there potentially coming, but also you may need to identify anything which may be recurring or a repetition of the same claim, because the same mistake may be made throughout several clients. We need to talk to landlords to bring them into it. Perhaps a landlord would be concerned he's going to an empty building. Landlords don't like empty buildings, they like certainty. The employment case, again, indemnity is possibly needed. Where did the blame lie? Is there a problematic member of staff who might be staying? I.e., the problematic staff member being someone who winds other staff up the wrong way. And this is all sorts of things that need to be found out. It is extra work for you, and it's probably not what you're looking to be doing, but if you want to buy this practice, you're going to have to spend some time in it. Bad publicity, as we've touched upon, could be alleviated with a sale, especially if the counterparty wants a scalp. And like I said, it's vital to keep this associate on side. It could be pivotal for client retention or even taking the practice to the next step. So we've got the problems, we've identified them, we've been through them, and we've got possible solutions. Okay, so how do we present this to a buyer? Flag issues early. You want to flush out people who might be wavering. There is nothing to be achieved by hiding it, and then it comes out later. You'll have wasted your time, the buyer's time, agent's time, and you just get disappointment. They're not going to. It's highly unusual, something which is really serious, that somebody who really wants your practice is going to walk away from if you make them aware. If they want it and they appreciate what you're telling them, they will stay. But people who might be wavering, as soon as they find a problem later on, you won't see them for dust. So let's flush them out early. Again, we mentioned those who are serious. We'll be happy to hear from what you've got to say to them. We're taking these accounts into issue. I would say to the seller, we need a better, more flexible payment plan, say 30% completion, 30% after 12 months, 20% after 18 months, and the balance, which my maths still work, is 20% after 24 months. It's a nice transition period, hopefully, to see us through this. And somebody has just bought me a glass of finest scotch to help lubricate my throat, even better than the Chancellor at the budget. This is while I'm walking home tonight. I've pitched the multiple at this practice, given the circumstance, at 1.15 times the gross fees. Perhaps, as you might say, priced to sell. Ordinarily, given the fact that it's a strong position, ordinarily, were it not for the problems, I would be pushing for 1.3 times, which is a wee bit higher than the average, and I would certainly consider very seriously introducing the associate buyer at an early stage to see what can be done there. As I say, you don't want to have the party spoiled later on. You've got to keep them on side and let them know you do care about them. Okay, so again, if you're working with an agent, the agents would work with both sides to cover these issues and help with the presentation. Like selling your house, you can sell the practice all on your own. There's no reason why you can't. You get a better result with an agent, whether you use our services, whether you go to somebody else. It doesn't matter. The advantage of an agent, I can tell you, is dispassionate involvement, because when someone says something or makes a comment, instead of raising your hackles, the agent can understand what lies behind it, and the agent can interpret it and put it through to you in a more in a way which is less hurtful potentially. Okay, timeline. If you want to sell your practice now, I'd say about this practice, I'd say, well, let's look at this practice. I know it says early February, market in March. Let's put the clock forward a couple of months. So that would be, say, what we're now in March, April, early May. I'd say go for formalities and early, perhaps April, and look perhaps in May, June time to get the marketing. And I've put one's tax returns are out of the way. Tax returns, of course, are out of the way now because it was January when this was written, to be delivered at the end of January. But if there's something on the horizon, for example, there could be a budget change which comes in, you want to make sure that everyone can be committed time-wise. I'd expect responses to take from marketing 2 to 3 months, could be longer with the issues of the local buyer who knows about it. And also, we do have to find a buyer with a large sum. It's a lot of money, this 675,000 gross fees times 1.15 is, do the maths, a lot of money. You're looking in the £750,000 essentially, and not a lot of people have got that kind of money in cash readily available. And by early April, so it's run forward a couple of months, that's May, June perhaps, I'd say July actually. If a party comes forward, expect an initial meeting before the end of the month. Heads of terms by May, which let's say that's July. Heads of terms again, draw up yourself, a broker will do that for you, and that the heads of terms is the point where the commitment is coming now. And I would allow, if everything is well from the initial meetings, etc., a month, a good month for due diligence, give the buyer that confidence that what you see is what you get, and exchange contracts by the end of June, which should in this case be the end of August. A word of warning here, exchange of contracts, it means the deal is complete. It's not like purchasing a house with a commercial transaction. There's no window between exchange and completion. When you exchange the contracts, the deal is a done deal, and it's handed over immediately to the buyer. Okay, and that is the end of the webinar, everybody. I thank you all for attending. I will be in touch afterwards. You can see how to get hold of me on the screen. If you have any questions, you can feel free to send them through now. I'll keep the screen open for another couple of minutes. And you can also email me directly on to Norman, N-O-R-M-A-N, no, I've not had the whiskey yet, Norman at max70.co.uk, and you're welcome to telephone me on the free phone number underneath. If I'm not available or I'm busy with other calls, especially in the next few minutes or tomorrow morning from as a result of the webinar, leave a message. I will get back to you. In any event, I hope to be in touch with you. Thank you very much for attending. Lines are open for another minute for sending any questions through. Have a very good evening, everybody.